everyone, it's time for us to go ahead and take a look at the M3 iMac and see how this particular iMac holds up in 2025. Now, the thing I can definitely tell you about these M3 iMacs is that in a lot of ways, they're still completely worth buying, right? They're still very good types of devices, and there's not a lot to really hate on them in this particular, standpoint. They're very good. They give you very good displays. And I will tell you, for the most part, if you're going to go through and you're looking for like some sort of all-in-one PC, it doesn't really get like an insane amount better than something like this M3 iMac. And like I said, I think that's just kind of one of those big things to keep in mind here. They're very good. They're very fast. On the other hand, though, if you are looking for maybe a better deal, there might be some better options out there for you. So we'll take a look at this throughout the whole entire video. First things first, though, if you do want to go ahead and pick up some Macs that I would recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description below. You can get them from there, and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the M3 iMac. This particular Mac came out a little bit of time ago, so it's not, super old or anything like that. It still is a very capable, very fast, and very powerful machine for the most part. This type of Mac, the concept of it is that it is basically like an all-in-one PC, right? So it's an all-in-one computer, and that's kind of what you're getting on, when you're buying this thing. And my Mac just made a noise, surprisingly, from that. Now, when we look at the outside, this is the one thing that we have to keep in mind. The display on the front, it's a very beautiful display. So when we go ahead and take a look at the display of the M3 iMac, we have to remember just basically how good of a display Apple put inside of this all-in-one PC. So on the front, you're getting a 24-inch 4.5K Retina display. Now, I used to have an iMac on an everyday basis. It used to be the Mac that I'd use, and I genuinely enjoyed having an all-in-one PC. And the reason for that was because it just gave me like a really easy, simple to use type of device. And it was just kind of, as soon as you turn it on, everything was there. I didn't have to worry about connecting my Mac into my monitor and having all these other things to worry about. And that is one of the really big advantages that I really do like about having like an M3 iMac. So in this particular example, I'm a humongous fan of these all-in-one PCs, and I do think in a lot of ways they hold up very, very well. And the display itself is very good. Like, it is a very good type of display. And like I said before, I do think if you are about to go through and pick up a panel or pick up any device for that matter, you're definitely going to be able to get a really good type of experience inside of this type of device when it comes down to it. You have your webcam on the front, which is also still very, very good. You have your panel itself. You get a bit of bezel on the bottom of it. It's not anything crazy, but it is, it's not necessarily the best type of panel of all time, or it's not the best type of bezel of all time. And that is probably one of the more annoying things when it kind of comes down to this type of panel, is that you do have to kind of go through and you have to get this massive bezel on the bottom. So it is kind of unfortunate. And maybe the other thing too, if you're not really a big fan of the 4.5K display, if you wanted to get a bigger display, you can dock it up to a different display, but you also have to go through and still remember that you're going to have to basically, still have to deal with this panel, because there's no way to like just take the chipset out of this panel when it comes down to it. So from that side too, that is kind of one of those other minor things to kind of keep in mind there from that side. Now, on top of that, another important thing to keep in mind here too is that within this type of device, you're going to have to remember that you're still getting like a very good type of build quality. These things still look very good. They still perform and feel very good too. So there's not that much to complain about there from that side. When you do kind of go through and you're still using this type of panel, on the back side, there's a little bit of a different type of layout here. So this is also one of those big things to keep in mind here too. With these types of Macs, you have to remember that you're essentially going to be going through and getting 2 USB Type-C ports on the backside, or 4 USB Type-C ports depending on which model you get. The 4-port option is going to be a more expensive option. The 2-port option is going to be slightly cheaper. So again, depending on which way you kind of go, you're either going to be getting the cheaper option, you could also be going through and getting the more expensive option, but that right there is also going to be another one of those kind of things to keep in mind there, because if you are going to want to get the option that is going to be a little bit better, you're going to have to keep in mind that that one is going to cost more money. It's just like any other device, but for me personally, I wouldn't really be a fan of getting the 2-port option. I'd rather get the 4-port option. I feel like that one would probably end up being the better one for me, and it would probably end up giving me a better experience when it kind of comes down to it from that particular side. So again, it isn't the biggest deal in the world, but that could just be one of those other small minor things you might run into from that particular side. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there too. Now, when it comes down to the performance of these types of Macs, one thing that I love about these types of Macs in general is that they are very fast and very good at performing types of devices. These types of Macs are still going to be able to go through and give you like a really good type of experience, like I said before, when it comes down to the performance sector. Like these types of devices are still going to be able to go through and give you a really good type of experience. Because of that M3 chipset, these types of devices are going to be able to give you a really good type of experience. So for starters, this thing is giving you that 8-core CPU or 8-core GPU if you're getting that standard kind of like cheaper model. And it does kind of go up to a variant amount of RAM depending on how you kind of spec this thing out. So once again, if you get the cheaper option, you can get up to you get, I think 8 gigs of RAM starting off, but you can go up to 24 gigabytes of RAM, again, depending on the model that you end up choosing. So that right there is going to be another really cool thing to be able to go through and pick up inside of these types of Macs as well, because these things are still going to be a very good performing type of Mac when it comes down to it from that side. And like I said before, I do think if you're going to go through and pick up any sort of Mac for the most part, you are actually going to be able to go through and get a very good type of experience from a Mac inside of these types of devices when it comes down to that side. So from a performance perspective, you don't really have to worry about the, capability, or from a power perspective, because these Macs are still going to be able to go through and give you a very fast Mac. These things aren't really that old, right? They're still fairly relevant. They're still fairly powerful. And like I said before, I do think if you're going to go through and get any sort of Mac from a performance perspective, these things are still going to be able to go through and give you a good type of experience from that side, which I do think for the most part is another big advantage for these types of devices when it comes down to it. So again, it isn't really the biggest deal in the world, but I do think it would be another one of those really nice things to keep in mind there for the most part. One thing I like about these Macs too is that because they're just an all-in-one PC, you don't really have to worry about these Macs kind of from a battery standpoint. They're just a all-in-one, right? But there are still some caveats when you're getting an all-in-one PC or a Mac like this. One, it may seem like a better value per dollar, but because of the new Mac Mini Apple has just made, it makes this one a little bit of a harder sell, especially if you're somebody who has basically gone through and has picked up something like a monitor. If you already have a pretty good monitor inside of your device, it really doesn't make a lot of sense to go through and buy something, like an M3 iMac, especially if you already have a good monitor. If you have a good or decent monitor, it does make a lot more sense, I think, to go through and buy something maybe like a, current generation, Mac Mini, and then going through and then purchasing some sort of like Mac or, some sort of display or monitor after the fact. So that's kind of the way I see it from that perspective. Again, it isn't the biggest deal in the world, but if you are going to go through and pick up some sort of a Mac, that is kind of one of those things that you're probably going to end up experiencing there. So I think these types of Macs are still good values. I think they still give you like a good amount of, power and capability for the most part. But I would imagine that if I'm going to go through and recommend a sort of Mac or recommend something to some people, it would be a monitor Mac Mini combination and not necessarily a like M3 iMac type of, setup, in my personal opinion. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there too. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.